was all the ballyhoo about women wearing pants after all? It certainly made more sense than those bulky skirts and hoops and petticoats and confining corsets. After all, she had nothing that needed squeezing in or pushing up. Because she was tall and wore breeches and a hat that hid her sun-kissed hair, she'd been taken for a boy more than once. She peeked down over the banister. Lucinda hadn't moved from her guard at the newel post, and the glare she sent upward made Jesselynn continue on to her room. She plopped down on the edge of the bed. Outside, she could hear the robin's morning song, echoed by the cardinals. Everyone, or rather everything, was outside but her. She crossed to the window and pushed aside the lacy curtains. No one was in sight. Lucinda had stayed at her post, or at least was still in the house. Jesselynn pushed the window higher and bent to crawl out, reaching with one leg for the thick branch she'd used as an escape hatch for years. She found her footing from long practice, hand over hand guided herself down the tree, and dropped from the last branch to the thick lawn. "Young ladies shouldn't have to go out their windows and down the tree, either." She threw the thought over her shoulder as she trotted down the dirt road to the stables. "One of these days I'll have a plantation of my own to manage, and then we'll see who rides what." After all, that's what all well-bred Southern gentlewomen did, marry and manage their husband's house as well as a good part of the plantation. She knew there had been 2 young men asking her father's permission to court her, but when her father asked her about them, she'd shrugged and shaken her head. They were just boys, after all. He hadn't insisted. "Piffle! I'd rather ride than be married any day." Ignoring the thrust of guilt that reminded her she should be at her mother's side for the day's instructions, she trotted past the slave quarters, a row of small houses with gardens in back. She knew her father provided better houses for the slaves than most of the plantation owners. And while some of the younger slaves had been in the classroom with her, she wasn't supposed to know that he taught all his people to read, write, and do sums, too. It was against the law for slaves to read, but Major Joshua Highwood was a far-seeing, godly man who believed the law was wrong, and he had to follow his own conscience. Jesselynn argued that slavery was also wrong, but so far he hadn't written the manumission papers for his slaves. She missed him when he was gone, as he had been the last week, off to Frankfort, trying to keep the South out of war, or at least Kentucky. Both of her brothers, Adam, the elder at 22, and Zachary at 19, were all fired sure the South would win the war in a week, 3 at the most. She'd heard so many rantings of the wonders of Southern chivalry, she was sick of it. Why should the women just smile and say how wonderful the men were? How glorious to go off and fight. For what, she wasn't sure, after eavesdropping on their near-to-fisticuffs discussions. She had a feeling many of the hot-headed young men weren't too sure either. The glory of fighting was all they could talk about, how they would run right over the enemy. Maybe they didn't think about getting shot, injured, or killed. Men's wounds wouldn't be much different than a deer's, for pity's sake. She'd cried buckets the first time she saw a deer that had been shot. The bullet hole that tore open its heart still showed up sometimes in her dreams. It was all a conundrum to her. She smiled to herself. That was her newest word. She liked to be able to use a new word 3 times in the next day. Then she would remember it forever, or so the boy's tutor had said. After Adam and Zachary went off to school, he'd stayed on to teach the 3 younger girls, another of her father's wars against the mores of the day. "Hello, handsome." She greeted the fiery red or blood-bay stallion, Ahab, who bobbed his head and nickered as soon as he saw and heard her. "How you dis morning, Missy Jess?" The soft voice of Joseph, their head groom, floated out from the stall where he was giving the stallion one last brushing. "Dis old son surely be ready to run." "Good. I am too." Jesselynn inhaled the fragrance of clean horse, which was better in her mind than any perfume, even those made in Paris. She rubbed the stallion's ears and smoothed his black forelock. "You been behavin'? You know I got in a mighty lot of trouble this morning to come ride you, so don't you